Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, I wanted to work a little bit backwards because I was looking at circles here, and I remember, if for those of you that don't remember, an older comedian who whom he actually passed away very recently, um, I believe. I can't give you an exact date, but his name was Dick Gregory. He used to talk a lot about organ harvesting, and he mentioned a lot of different conspiracy, from a lot of different things. He would come up with different topics, and it was always viewed as, oh, that old man doesn't know what he's talking about. He's off his rocker. He's crazy. Well, I'm just here kind of looking at some things, and I kind of already knew it was going on, but this actually gives some validity to some of what he was saying. So, and I think what really sparked my attention on this topic is because I was actually watching a documentary, and it was about all the different types of trafficking that happens in foreign countries or countries. And one of them that's prevalent is organ trafficking. And so there was this man, I guess he has to be on dialysis, and they had different stories of different people who were on dialysis, or either they had to find a kidney. And so this one young man, he was doing everything the legal way, where he was not going to traffickers and trying to find a kidney, going online to try to see if he can get somebody to give up their kidney and that he would pay them money. And so there's a whole story behind all of this, but this is pretty much in relation to what is going on, but it's a little bit more heavier detailed. And so there's a lot of ads here, and so it's videos and things to it. This article talks about a specific trade that goes on that has gotten really, really big, and it's called a human harvest, and it's out of the Daily Mail. And so right now there's an advertisement over it, so you can't really see the top of it, but this is fairly recent. Let me bring it up. Okay, so it's out of the Daily Mail, July 21st, 2018. And it talks about human harvesting. Okay, and so a human harvest, China's organ trafficking exposed in $1 billion a year. A new documentary that hopes to expose the illegal organ trade in China. So China's organ trade is allegedly worth a massive $1 billion a year in US dollars. So human rights lawyer David Matas tells the gory details of what goes on. So tens of thousands of innocent people are killed on demand, it is claimed. Now that is the creepy, scary part about it. So political prisoners in particular, it's believed that most were members of the banned Falun Gong movement. And so some of the wording here is in a different language, so excuse me if I don't pronounce it correctly. So I'm doing this here. So it goes on to say that documentary will air on SBS 1's Dateline program Control. And so I'm going to go through this, and then there's some pictures, so I have to warn you that some of the pictures are really graphic, and they show where you can actually see them, taking organs out of people. And so I probably won't stay on that too long, But I'm going to also shift gears and go to two popularized stories. Well, two stories that actually have a lot of questions raised that sort of relate to this. So, this story here is by a John Carney for the Daily Mail Australia. And so it goes on to read that when reports first emerged from China in 2000, science to sell is about to blow the lid off the illegal organ trade that is now allegedly worth a staggering $1 billion a year in the US. Despite the fact 10,000 organs are transplanted in China every year, yet there are only a tiny number of people on the official donor registry. So that's a question mark right there. That would raise questions. So, Human Harvest, China's organ trafficking, will show how once researchers around the world, including human rights lawyer David Matas and former Canadian member of the parliament David Kilagore, began to uncover the gory details, the true picture was soon uncovered. And so you'll see there's video. Some of the people who are against the organ trafficking, and it's pretty big, and it's been covered up, I guess, or not talked about as widely because I guess people have it in their mind if they don't know anybody or they don't see anything or they haven't heard it enough, it must not be an issue. And the more people cover things up, the more it becomes a bigger issue. And then eventually it can't be covered up anymore. It comes to the light. And so in 2006, the non-governmental coalition was formed called the Coalition to Investigate the Persecution of the Falun Gong in China. So they requested that Mr. Kilangor, Mr. Matas investigate the allegations of the organ harvesting of the Falun Gong practitioners in China because of their existence or extensive academic and political background and the prior involvement in human rights activism. So the damning evidence they uncovered suggests that tens of thousands of innocent people have been killed. Let me read that again. Tens of thousands of innocent people have been killed on demand to supply an ongoing illegal organ transplant industry. So how these two Nobel Peace Prize nominees piece together the evidence and continues to fight against the unimaginable horror is told in the program. So that's pretty much what the documentary is expressing, everything that's written here. And so it actually has visual where you can see what they're doing, the procedures and what kinds of things. And if you really pay attention, this is pretty big and not enough press coverage is talked about on these issues. So human rights lawyer David Matas is pictured here at the top. Investigated allegation of organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners in China and uncovered some gruesome facts. And so you can see where they're doing some work here. So China's organ trafficking will show how researchers began to uncover the gory details. So the pair have spent years investigating organ trafficking in China, and it's claimed that political prisoners are used as organ donors. And so they believe the organs come from members of the Falun Gong movement, a quasi-religious group with millions of followers, which is banned by the Chinese government. And so I can testify that this hospital forcibly removed organs such as livers, corneas. It says former worker Annie of allegations that members of the banned Falun Gong movement were killed for their organs. And so I'm just going to stop for a moment here. You can see where they're holding an organ of someone. The pair have spent years investigating organ trafficking in China, and it's claimed that political prisoners are being used as live organ donors. So, who else, if this is such a big, booming business, who else could fall victim to this? Those are some questions you might ask. And so, excuse me for the gory pictures, but you can see where people will actually out in the open, they're, taking organs out of the person's body. So during a rally joined by thousands, the Falun Gong practitioner of Taipei, four demonstrators played in an action drama against that they said was the Chinese communists killing the Falun Gong followers and harvesting of their organs in concentration camps. So some practitioners were still breathing, okay, after their organs were removed, but they were thrown into the hospital's incinerator anyway. And so this is pretty horrific right here. This is like a live horror movie in the making that you're seeing, but it's not a movie, it's actually real life. So filmmaker Leon Lee, who is based in Canada, is the man behind, and he first read about the allegations in 2006, and he couldn't take it all in. So the story seemed too incredible to believe. And I believe that's the reason why people don't really talk about it, because they don't think it's really happening until they know somebody or know of somebody that has experienced something like this. And it's just like some of the issues that happen here, just in America, in cities, people don't really see it. They don't think it's real. If it's not happening in their backyard, or so to speak, it's not happening close enough that they can relate to it, then it doesn't seem like it's a real story. But it is happening. It's just people don't realize it until they actually know of somebody who's been victim or fall victim to this. And so the story seemed too incredible to believe, but several months later, David Matas and David Killunger published their investigation report, Bloody Harvest. And he told the Daily Mail Australia. And so I was inspired to investigate further and see for myself if this horrific story could really be, and that's how it all began. So 8 years later, human harvesting has been released, and now you can see it for yourself too. And so the China organ trade is now worth a staggering $1 billion a year, Mr. Lee claims. In 1980 onwards, China's began withdrawing governmental funds from the health sector, expecting hospitals to start charging people for their services. According to the Chinese doctors, state funding is often not even enough to cover staff salaries for 1 month. Okay, and so yes, there's some video, there's still pictures, and you can see here where they have an organ and they're putting it on ice. So all they have to do is cut the organ out of someone, the organ that is being trafficked or sold, and they'll have like a little cooler with ice and keep it frozen until they could transport it to where whoever's paying for that organ is. And so the China organ trade is now worth a staggering $1 billion a year, it is claimed. So transplant range from about 60,000 to 170,000, depending on the operation. So there is a lot of money to be made there. Okay, so I'm gonna read that again. There's a lot of money in this. So sadly, the sale of organs has become a source of funding, Mr. Lee told Daily Mail Australia. Orient Organ Transplant Center in Tianjin reported revenue of at least 100 million yuan, approximately in US dollars, it would be 16 million, on liver transplants alone in 2007. So that number in one hospital for one kind of transplant in 1 year only. Now imagine the whole of China. Okay, how much money that would be, in other words. So these are practitioners of the Falun Gong protest in the Parliament Square over a 10-year persecution of their spiritual discipline by the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, and here, right here, you can see people. China outlawed Falun Gong as an evil cult in 1999 and has since detained tens of thousands of members that are a part of it. And so the subject is still one that people find hard to believe or do not want to believe for various reasons. So, however, in recent years, China has been heavily criticized by the United Nations for its use of death row prisoners for organ transplanting. Laws preventing organ tourism to China are being um, instated around the world and are already in place in Israel and in Spain. So both the US Congress and the European Parliament have passed resolutions condemning Chinese regimes practicing of the forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience as and asking China to stop such practices. And so here's thousands of people right here. And it says there are thousands of Falun Gong practitioners who sit in silence in front of the presidential office in Taipei. And this is them. So you see how disciplined they are in this right here. So it says stop killing Falun Gong. Okay, so members of Falun Gong movement demonstrate outside the Hawaiian Convention Center in Hawaii in 2011. Canada's recent subcommittee on international human rights also unanimously passed a similar motion. It's a start, but a lot still needs to be done. Awareness and action at this point is really essential, and we can't keep allowing this human rights abuse to continue, Mr. Lee said, as it would have been impossible and very dangerous to shoot in mainland China. Mr. Lee filmed in several of other countries and obtained footage from this source in China. And so you see here where people are protesting against the genocide of this whole thing. And so Mexican protesters demonstrate against China's actions towards the Falun Gong community as well. And so you see, here's the protesters here. And so here is what they have in Oregon that is sitting in a cooler on ice. And then in recent years, China has been heavily criticized by the UN, which is the United Nations, for its use of death row prisoners for organ transplanting. Finding people that wanted to talk and gaining their trust was a slow process. The film took 8 years to make because people don't want to get caught if they're in this type of racket. And so it is very difficult because people fear persecution from the Chinese regime. Identities were hidden in some cases to protect those involved, but for all his best intentions, will anything really be done to stop the gruesome business? So practically, or particularly considering the power that China wields worldwide, Mr. Lee believes that it will. So this is a pretty gruesome picture here. And China said that authorities had broken no laws while cracking down on spiritual groups while insisting that mind control. And so this has been a big thing, and it's ongoing, and so people are wanting answers. They want this thing investigated. So, and people believe, some people don't believe, and that's the problem. That's why it hasn't got much of that variety about it. So here, there's so many ads on this. It's the reason why it kind of, pops on and off. So I'm gonna get off that page together because there was so many on there, and I really don't know why. I kind of feel like maybe it was on purpose. So I might even get off this one too because it had a lot of ads. Is because I think they're not really talking about this because they don't. It'll affect them personally. So maybe it doesn't hit home because they don't know of anybody I think is affected by this. So that brings me to this. Actually, other page pulled up was showing online sites where it's for organs. So basically, that's what the other page was. It was, you can actually go online and purchase organs, but I believe in the dark web people do this. And so there were two articles, and these were up deaths, supposedly. Now, one that people might is Kendrick Johnson Death, missing organ or reason foul. Teenage, he had been shown video clips, and it was a mystery behind his exhumed, and his organs were missing. So the parents wanted some answers as to why his organs were missing, and there were newspapers stuffed in his body, and they wanted to reopen the case because they didn't really trust the people who were actually over the case. And it comes to find out that this boy, that I guess he was in a gym, and it says that his body was turned upright in the gym, and he died of emotional asphyxiation. What they uncovered is he had hit force in the thyroid artery, and what someone who actually of his body, it says that he was hit in a major artery, and it wasn't an accidental death. And so that's what raised the red flags. And so I'm just going to go on. I actually read this story, and so some people might be even familiarized with it, but it says that the parents of a Georgia teenager whose body was found inside a roll on Thursday, the fact that their son was recently found to be buried without his internal organs was the question. Was his organs not in the body? So any reason to suspect there was sign of foul play. It was some cut by investigators. So the person who 17-year-old, he was on January 11th in South Georgia, and it says Lowndes County Sheriff. And so if I'm wrong, if I didn't say that name correctly. So investigators concluded that he had died in a freak accident, falling head first upright in a mat and becoming trapped. And so it says that Johnson's family believed that he was killed, and that he had been they had been pressuring authorities to take a second look at the case. And so the teenager family announced on Thursday that the Florida lawyer who helped push the criminal prosecution in the shooting of Trayvon has joined. So they that case for the investigation of Johnson's death. His parents also revealed that when Johnson's body was exhumed, over a second audit was done, private pathologist discovered that his organs were missing, and that newspaper had been filled in the body cavity. So they felt outraged when they discovered that this was the case, and about them stuffing their son's body with newspaper, Jacqueline Johnson said. So Benjamin Crump, the lawyer who helped focus national attention on the 2012 shooting death of Martin by the Neighborhood Watch volunteer George Zimmerman, said the discovery raises questions about why Johnson's organs were missing, and he couldn't be examined in the follow-up autopsy, and the family requested it. And so when you think about it logically, it seems to be that some kind of conspiracy or happened to Kendrick when he died. So Crump said this. So school officials found Johnson's body in a gym mat after the parents reported him missing the night before. So he was stuck upside down in the middle of a wrestling mat. It had been rolled up, propped upright behind bleachers. So the sheriff, Chris Prine, said that he suspected Johnson became trapped trying to retrieve a shoe. That doesn't make sense. So it fell into the center of the large rolled up mat, and Georgia Bureau Investigation medical examiners concluded that he died of It's called positional asphyxiation, meaning his body was up, that he got stuck and that he was unable to breathe. And so, but the judge agreed in May to exhume the body. So Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, the parents, hired Dr. William R. Anderson to provide a second opinion because they weren't trying. And you know your child, even if good, bad, whatever it is, parents usually, if they're, close to their children, they know their children. And so it says that the private pathologist presented a 4-page report on 15th saying that he detected neck. So it concluded that the teenager died of blunt force trauma near the carotid artery. So that was a fatal blow that appeared to be non-accidental. So in fact, that's what raised their flags even higher, that this was a cover-up. And so Johnson's family said that Anderson also revealed that most of the internal organs had been missing and that the body cavity was filled with newspaper. So the GBI spokeswoman, Sherry Lang, said that Thursday that the agency's policy is to return all the organs to the body after the autopsies. So most of the organizations confirm that they have a procedure that they do when if they're going to take out an organ, if people are requested to donate their organs, there's certain procedures that are done. But in the end of this article, people that are involved in embalming bodies and, the work of bodies after they do an autopsy, none of them confirm that putting newspaper in the body cavity was a proper protocol of what procedures that they do. So that even raised more red flags. That's that story right there. So it goes on to say that Johnson family and Anderson had revealed that most of the internal organs were missing in the body cavity. And so those organs were in the body when we sent it back to the funeral home, is which was stated here. And so it goes on to say that, but Loudoun County Coroner Bill Watson said that many of Johnson's organs were deemed to be too badly decomposed. So that was the statement that he used. He said to be preserved, and it had to be disposed of before the body was sent to a funeral. Trust that. It would have been during or immediately after the autopsy, he said. So Harrington Funeral Home in Valdosta, which handled Johnson's body, calls attorney Roy Copeland. So basically, he's saying that whoever's told them this information, which was the county coroner Bill Watson, said that many of Johnson's too badly decomposed to be preserved, had been disposed of before the body. Well, this person here at this funeral home was saying that Johnson's body, it says, which was handled by Johnson's body missing. And it says that embalming practice is to fill empty space in body cavities with materials such as sawdust or cotton. So pretty much different these other people are seeing. So at least they would fill it with something else, not newspaper. And so the medical examiners commonly remove internal organs during forensic autopsies. And so after autopsies, those organs are typically sealed in a plastic bag and placed back in the body. And so they don't just throw them out and then you don't know where they are. So it says that Vernie Fontaine, who runs the embalming school in Springfield, Missouri, when organs are missing, such as in the case involving organ donors, space inside the body cavity is often filled with an absorbent preservative powder, Fontaine said. And so sometimes cotton is used or powder. And so that pretty much tells you that something is fishy about that whole thing. So any of you want to read this story more extensively, basically it's saying what I just said, that they question it, and they the parents, they felt like they wanted to reopen and investigate the case of why their son actually um, was actually, they wanted to be a homicide because they have it on his death certificate that it was an accidental death, but they want it to be rewritten as a homicide. And so here's another story where you see this is a younger, and a teen was found dead in a lake with his organs removed, and it was deemed as an accidental drowning. And so this right here, he was 14, Jason Smith. He was found dead in the Eros, Louisiana lake, and his death was deemed accidental as well, drowning, but his body was found with no organs. So his family believe that they know who the killers are. So these are ads, so excuse me. So they know who and why the organs were removed. And they also said that their child was also raped. But why would someone cover up the murder? So Smith's family believed that it was because the murder was done by KKK, card-carrying son of an FBI agent. And so it sounds far-fetched. Another story that sounds kind of like, oh, I don't know, to the average person, they doesn't believe. But the missing organs mean that maybe this murder should have gotten more attention. This story didn't get as much attention, much press. It was also kind of, covered up or watered over. And so at the time of the death, he was found dead June 6, 2011. When was the other kid? He was found, okay, his death was in January 11th. And so American and they are African Black, and they both had similar situations, but where someone murdered them, it was covered up, and their organs were missing. And so this kind of brings up, what's really going on here, people? Should, we worry now that we've got something so big and so far-fetched out of control that people don't believe it, that it could be actually here in the US happening, which it is. Really talking about it, and they don't feel like it affects them because they haven't known anybody to have this happen to them, or so they think. We did see these two suddenly were, oh, there's probably other stories as important. So, yeah, you know what I mean by that. But in that, no, there, that anything having to do with people of color, it's not looked at as much of importance. And so these are the stories that I thought were interesting. Your thoughts, your comments, your feedback on these stories. Isn't it is it seems coincidental, or is there a connection here? And after reading about how big the industry in China has gotten with just organ trafficking, and if I put in organ traffic, if I say I want to, buy a kidney, there's a site that comes up, and they say you can get prices, organ trafficking and kidney prices, havoc scope, black market. And so there's prices on here. So this is what I was trying to pull up. So organ trafficking is the buying and selling of kidneys, livers, and other human organs. Listed below are the prices of organs and kidneys sold on the black market. The cost to buy and sell kidneys and other organs are based upon open source documents. The organ trafficking facts were taken from news stories and medical public about the illegal organ trade. So the amount of money that was paid for the donor who sold the kidney is listed on the US dollars. So that's how here. And so here's a list right here. I'll just give you a throw out. This is a list. The average paid by a kidney buyer, $150,000. Average paid to a seller of a kidney, $5,000. Okay, kidney broker in the Philippines, 1,000 to 1,500. Okay, a kidney broker in Yemen, 60,000. See, kidney buyer in China, 47,500. Kidney buyer in Egypt, 20,000. Kidney buyer in Israel, 125,000 to 135,000. Kidney buyer in Moldova, 100,000. 250,000. Kidney buyer in Singapore is 300,000. So tell me that this ain't happening. It's happening everywhere, and in the United States. If I go from Thailand, it's 10,000. South Africa, 200,000. Singapore, 300,000. In the U.S., 120,000. Okay, those are kidney buyers. Okay, kidney buyers in Saudi Arabia, 16,000. Kidney sellers in Bangladesh, 2,500. Okay, it gives you the sellers as well. And so the kidney sellers in China is 15,000. Costa Rica, a seller is 20,000. A seller in Egypt is 2,000. And the kidney seller in India is 1,000. Kidney seller in Israel is 10,000. Kidney seller in Kenya is $650. Okay, and Moldova is 2,500 to 3,000. And kidney seller in Pakistan is 10,000. The list goes down, okay? It goes down, down, down. In Europe, it says the asking price is 312,650. Okay, that's for a lung. A liver in China, the seller, 3,660. A liver buyer in China, 21,900. Okay, a kidney transplant operation in Europe is 32,000. Kidney transplant operation in China, 15,200. And so 10,000 profit, that's kidney traffickers in Turkey. Okay, and so the list goes on. And there's a list right here, okay? Human trafficking, see related information about human trafficking. And so there's all kinds of different trafficking, but organs is big business, y'all. So it is going on. So despite what people are thinking, it's a possibility that this kid right here, Kendrick Johnson, 17, he was found January the 11th in South Georgia, and all his organs were gone. Let me go down to the end of the story here. As I was reading it, it says their son's death said that Siobhan King, an attorney working with the family in inquest, would present the evidence in Johnson's death in a public hearing, much like a trial. And so Johnson's parents hoped that the outcome would change the manner of death listed on the death certificate from accidental to a homicide, paving the way to reopen a criminal investigation. This can happen to any of our kids, said Kenneth Johnson, this teenager father. So he just can't allow this to happen again and again and again. And so the reports of the family's lawyers also calling for authorities to release surveillance video. And so they had released video in the past. People have seen it, but it still raises red flags as to what happened. They do see somebody in the video that walked past, but a lot of it was bleeped out, so not much is shown. But there's still speculation around the questions that are unanswered is why he had newspaper in his body cavity and not his organs. So Johnson's family asked the Justice Department to get involved, arguing that the authorities failed to investigate Johnson's death thoroughly because he's Black. Exactly. But the Justice Department found insufficient evidence to support an investigation. So the U.S. Attorney Michael Moore in Macon has been monitoring the case, but has yet to announce whether he'll take any further action. So Moore did not immediately return phone messages Thursday. So there's a lot of explaining to do. And so this other one was the Black Louisiana teen, also found dead in the lake, and his organs were removed in an accidental drowning, so to speak, which the father in the video, there's a video showed with the father who says that his son actually was afraid. He really wasn't a swimmer, and that he wouldn't go nowhere near a boat and water like that. And he said that he knows his son, and he knows his son wouldn't have done that and gotten in the boat and just been in there by himself like that, because he wasn't, and from what the father said, he wasn't into swimming and getting in boats and things like that. And so that they knew that it was a cover up. And so here it has the boy's face. It says he accidentally drowned, but why did he have no organs? Once again. And so these stories are not fake. They're real stories, but if they happen to be of Black people or what people think African American are, they don't seem of importance. But yet we have issues here saying that organ traffickers' prices and kidney transplant sales are the big top dollar. And so that just raises more questions, as to what is really going on here. Okay. You have online where you can actually find out prices of kidneys and livers and things like that. And there's a big market. Kidney inside the world's biggest organ market. You know, there's articles upon articles of this, even, in some of the major news stories, that really it's not talked about a lot. But Black people, we know of some stories that have a lot of questions raised. Look at what the headlines read. And so this raises a lot of questions and a lot of doubt in once again, law enforcement and authorities, whether they're going to be honest or not. So your thought, your feedback on these issues, and I'm going to let this story go. Thanks for listening.